Hello everybody, Mrs. Mack here with our week 4 lesson on problem and solution. So if you had questions or trouble, please watch this and see if it'll help. Also, if you need any further help or have further questions, you know how to reach me and I'm here to help. So let's get started by reading a story. The Stray Dog. Quan was in his neighborhood walking home from the bus stop when a medium-sized dog came running up to him. It was a shaggy white dog with orange spots and floppy ears and looked as if it didn't belong to anybody. Quan bent down for a closer look. He didn't recognize the animal from any of the families in the neighborhood. The dog was a big fluffy ball of dirt and had no tags, so there was little doubt. The dog was a stray. Quan wondered what he should do. Quan walked the rest of the way to his house, the dog following behind him. When Quan reached his front door, he picked up the dog and walked inside. The dog wagged his tail frantically with pleasure at being held. He felt like a huge sack of marbles in Quan's arms as Quan carried him into the kitchen. His father was there pouring orange juice into a glass. He took one look at Quan and the dog and nearly dropped the carton of juice. "You can't keep it, Quan," his father said. "I've already explained to you that we don't have the time or the space for a dog." "I know, Dad," said Quan, putting the dog down on the floor. "But he's definitely a stray, and I really want to keep him." The dog ran over to the kitchen door where Quan's dad kept a pair of running shoes. He took both shoes in his mouth and ran back over to Quan and plopped the shoes down in front of him. The dog sat there with his tongue hanging out, wagging his tail. Just then, Quan's mom walked in. "I guess he likes shoes," she said, smiling. "Why don't you take him to Uncle Bay's and see if he wants a dog?" She looked at Quan pointedly and said, "He gets so few visitors." Okay, I'll go see Uncle Bay," said Quan. He grabbed an old belt from the closet to use for a leash and walked out the door. Uncle Bay was Quan's least favorite relative, mainly because he was a real grump. He was about as warm as a block of ice. As a young man, Uncle Bay had fought in the army and had his vision severely damaged, so that now he could barely see. "Come in," his uncle called when Quan rang the bell. Quan walked into the living room with the dog, saying, "Hi, Uncle Bay, it's me, Quan." His uncle was sitting in an easy chair. "This stray dog followed me home this afternoon, and Mom and Dad said I couldn't keep it," Quan announced. "We thought you might like to keep him." "What am I going to do with a dog?" said Uncle Bay angrily. "Get him away. But first, go get my shoes. They're in my bedroom." Quan smiled knowingly at the dog. He walked the dog into Uncle Bay's bedroom and brought him over to a pair of loafers. The dog grabbed the shoes in his mouth and ran back into the living room. He plopped the loafers right in Uncle Bay's lap. Uncle Bay's face lit up like the sun. It was the first time in a long time that Quan saw his Uncle Bay smile. Uncle Bay looked at Quan and said, "What should I name him?" Okay, so we have our story here, and now we're going to go and start looking at our questions. What is the main problem Quan faces in the story? So when I go back to the story, I'm thinking, what is the most important thing that happened? What is Quan trying to do? So I'm going to go back and take a look. Right here, we see that the dog was a stray and Quan wondered what he should do. Okay, so right there it tells me my main problem. We also see that down here, when he brings him home, "You can't keep it, Quan," his father said. And down here he says, "I know, Dad, but he's a stray and I really want to help him." So when we go back to the question, what is the main problem Quan faces in the story? I said that Quan found a stray dog and can't keep him. He still wants to help the dog. So his problem is that even though he knows he can't keep the dog himself, he still wants to help the dog. He feels bad for it. The second question is, what is Quan's mother's suggestion? So as we read on the page, we're talking about Quan's dad here. And the dog sat there with his tongue hanging out, wagging his tail. Just then, Quan's mom walked in. I guess he likes shoes, she said, smiling. Why don't you take him to Uncle Bay's and see if he wants the dog? Okay, so the first thing that we see Mom say is right here. So, Quan's mother suggests he take the dog to Uncle Bay. Her idea is if we can't keep it, maybe Uncle Bay would want it. Our third question is, what is Uncle Bay's first reaction to the dog? So I'm going to go back to my reading and find what Uncle Bay says. So as we skim down the page, he's going over to see Uncle Bay. Uncle Bay says to come in. And then we hear him say, this stray dog followed me home this afternoon and Mom and Dad said I couldn't keep it, Quan announced. We thought you might like to keep him. What am I going to do with the dog? Said Uncle Bay angrily. Get him away. So the first thing that Uncle Bay says about the dog is, what am I going to do with it? I have to get rid of it. Take him away. Now, as you'll see, Mrs. Mack made a little mistake right there, and I didn't have white out, so you're going to just excuse my little X out. Uncle Bay gets mad and tells Quan to take the dog away. He's angry. He's like, what am I going to do with this animal? So then we come down and we look for the solution to Quan's problem. Mom and Dad said he can't keep it. Uncle Bay is angry and he's like, I don't want it, take it away. So we're going to go back and read the last paragraph, because obviously the solution is going to come after he's tried the suggestion. Quan smiled knowingly at the dog. He walked the dog into Uncle Bay's bedroom and brought him over a pair of loafers. The dog grabbed the shoes in his mouth and ran back into the living room. He plopped the loafers right in Uncle Bay's lap. Uncle Bay's face lit up like the sun. It was the first time in a long time that Quan saw his Uncle Bay smile. Uncle Bay looked at Quan and said, what should I name him? So, by looking at that final question, what has changed? What do we figure out has happened? If Uncle Bay wants to name the dog, what does that mean? So we're going to come back here. The solution to the problem. Uncle Bay agrees to keep the dog when the dog brings him his shoes. So, Uncle Bay is now happy because he realizes that the dog is going to be useful, and Quan's problem is solved because he now has found a home for the dog. All right, before I shoot off though, you also are doing some similes and metaphors this week. And I want to remind you that similes compare things using the words like or as. So when I was reading, I came back here and read this. He was about as warm as a block of ice. That is a simile. It is comparing Uncle Bay to a block of ice. So he's saying he's not really nice. He's kind of cold and he's hard to get along with. All right, so that would be an example of a simile. Down here, Uncle Bay's face lit up like the sun. In this simile, we're comparing Uncle Bay's face to the sun. So he's happy, it's glowing, it's exciting. A metaphor is different. A metaphor says that something is something else. So if I went back up here, instead of saying he was about as warm as a block of ice, I would say Uncle Bay is a block of ice. You're saying that he is something. Another example, A simile would be he is as sly as a fox. I'm comparing him to a fox. A metaphor would be he is a sly fox. So the difference is that similes compare by using like or as. Metaphors imply the comparison by saying that something is something else. I hope that helps you as you are working on your lessons this week. Again, if you need any help, you know how to reach me. Take care.